Coming up on 5 Minute News. 5 people dead at gay club after violent hate crime. Ukraine nuclear plant shelled, risking reactor leak. And COP27 agrees on climate fund at cost of emissions plan. It's Monday, November 21. I'm Anthony Davis. A far-right 22-year-old gunman opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle inside a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs, killing 5 people and leaving 25 injured before he was subdued by heroic patrons and arrested by police who arrived within minutes, authorities said on Sunday. The suspect used an AR-15-style semi-automatic weapon in the Saturday night shooting at Club Q, a law enforcement official said. A handgun and additional ammunition magazines also were recovered. On its Facebook page, the club called it a hate attack. Investigators were still determining a motive and whether to prosecute it as a hate crime, said El Paso County District Attorney Michael Allen. Police identified the gunman as Anderson Lee Aldrich, who was in custody and being treated for injuries. A man with that name was arrested in 2021 after his mother reported that he threatened her with a homemade bomb and other weapons, authorities said. The attack on Sunday ended when someone grabbed a handgun from the gunman and hit him with it, Colorado Springs Mayor John Suthers told the New York Times. The person who hit the gunman had him pinned down when police arrived. Suthers said the club had operated for 21 years and had not reported any threats before Saturday's attack. Authorities were called to Club Q at 11:57 p.m. on Saturday with the report of a shooting, and the first police officer arrived at midnight. Of the 25 people injured, at least 7 were in critical condition, authorities said. Some were hurt trying to flee, and it was unclear if all of the victims were shot. Anti-LGBT sentiment has become standard operating practice of the Republican Party, with hate speech against trans people and even drag queens seen as the cause of increasing hate crime. Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is under Russian control, was rocked by shelling on Sunday, drawing condemnation from the UN nuclear watchdog, which said such attacks risked a major disaster. More than a dozen blasts shook Europe's biggest nuclear power plant on Saturday evening and Sunday, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Moscow and Kiev both blamed the other for the shelling of the facility, as they have done repeatedly in recent months after earlier explosions. Citing information provided by plant management, the IAEA team on the ground said there had been damage to some buildings, systems and equipment, but none of them critical for nuclear safety and security so far. Repeated shelling of the plant in southern Ukraine has raised concern about the potential for a grave accident just 300 miles from the site of the world's worst nuclear accident, the 1986 Chernobyl disaster. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant provided about a fifth of Ukraine's electricity before Russia's invasion and has been forced to operate on backup generators a number of times. It has 6 Soviet-designed water-cooled and water-moderated reactors containing uranium-235. The reactors are shut down, but there is a risk that nuclear fuel could overheat if the power driving the cooling systems was cut. Shelling has repeatedly cut power lines. Russia's defense ministry said Ukraine fired shells at power lines supplying the plant, while TASS cited Kharkiv as saying some storage facilities had been hit by Ukrainian shelling. They said shells had been fired near a dry nuclear waste storage facility and a building that houses fresh spent nuclear fuel, but that no radioactive emissions had currently been detected. Countries closed this year's UN Climate Summit on Sunday with a hard-fought deal to create a fund to help poor countries being battered by climate disasters, even as many lamented its lack of ambition in tackling the emissions causing them. The deal was widely lauded as a triumph for responding to the devastating impact that global warming is already having on vulnerable countries. But many countries said they felt pressured to give up on tougher commitments for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order for the landmark deal on the Loss and Damage Fund to go through. Delegates, worn out after intense overnight negotiations, made no objections as Egypt's COP27 president Sameh Shoukry rattled through the final agenda items and gavelled the deal through. The deal for a loss and damage fund marked a diplomatic coup for small islands and other vulnerable nations in winning over the 27-nation European Union and the United States, which had long resisted the idea for fear that such a fund could open them to legal liability for historic emissions. Those concerns were assuaged with language in the agreement, calling for the funds to come from a variety of existing sources, including financial institutions, rather than relying on rich nations to pay in. But it likely will be several years before the fund even exists, with the agreement setting out only a roadmap for resolving lingering questions, including who would oversee the fund, how the money would be dispersed, and to whom. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.